who is SBI chair. And after some brief remarks from Tomasz, welcoming remarks, I'd then like to ask Tibor Schaffhauser, who's the SBSTA vice chair, to also make some welcoming remarks. So over to you, Tomasz.
Thank you very much, Nick, and welcome to all of you. I'm really pleased to see quite good attendance of this first meeting of the technical expert meetings here at this session in Bonn. And I must say that when we've been discussing which should be the areas that parties and experts would be considering in the context of climate action, it seemed to us that these two, urban environment, land use, are those two through the areas through which we as humans affect the environment, use the resources, and also affect climate, because we either live in cities or in the countryside. We either work in the industries or in agriculture. We all need forests, and we all need food security. So whatever we do, it is our everyday life. And through everyday life behavior, we can change the future. We can change the emission pattern. We can change the way we impact climate, nature, also other fellow neighbors. Distinguished colleagues, the growing percentage of people live in cities, and this percentage will continue to grow as the global population will be reaching the thresholds of 8, 9, 10 billion pretty soon. And we also need food. We use land for agriculture, and the sector of agriculture and forestry, the so-called AFOLU sector, is the second largest contributor to global emissions. Nearly 25% of these emissions come from this sector. That's what is the IPCC finding. Cities and the buildings are also a huge contributor. So we believe that the mitigation potential and the potential for joint action there will need to be thoroughly considered, and also considered from the point of view of what is the role played by agriculture in securing food, in providing rural livelihoods, and also in sustainable development in general. So this increasing climate risks and increasing demand for food, these are the highest priorities of many developing countries. But recognizing these priorities, we need to act in a way that we can achieve climate benefits through planning, through sustainable management, and I strongly believe that this meeting will help to identify possible actions and possible approaches that we can propose, that we can demonstrate, and we can share with others as our contribution to global climate action in this area. I'm not going to talk too much about the examples, about good projects, but I'm sure that during this discussion we will hear from the support from Georgia and the support that Austria has provided to them. I'm sure that we will hear from Costa Rica. I'm sure that we will hear in the course of this meetings later this week from other countries that do a lot to reduce deforestation and try to save, to the extent possible, the tropical forests. Colleagues, let's try to learn as much as possible from each other. The action on both small and large scale is badly needed. And well, this exercise, this technical examination process, of which the technical expert meetings are the crucial part of, is meant to offer the platform, is meant to offer the space for such an exchange of views and exchange of experiences. So good luck, have a very productive days, and I hope to see very good outcome at the end of this process. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot, Tomasz. And if we can now go over to Tibor for some brief welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Good afternoon, colleagues. Joining my colleague Tomasz, the SBI chair, in these opening remarks, it is important to tell that cities are not only a big part of global emissions, around 75%, but also 75% of the global GDP is coming from cities. Therefore, cities can contribute to sustainable development growth and ambitious mitigation targets in the urbanization process if steered in the right direction. By taking a holistic approach in terms of planning policy, increasing new ideas, and so on. This TEM is a great opportunity to learn from each other in good opportunities, in good policies, and good choices to be made. If the speed and scale of urbanization is supported by intensive policy making and good choices, this could bring opportunities and reducing emissions as well. Hopefully you will be able to give good examples today for these good policies. For example, from Australia in their support for Vanuatu, or Colombia's NAMA project, or maybe Japan can also allude on their support in Serbia in utilizing solar energy. Also, later on, during this TEM, this technical expert meetings on mitigation, there will be also other possibilities to give examples on how different cities are making strides in mitigation. These cities will be Singapore, Bogota, or even Bonn are host here, or the cities of Belgium or Benin. I'm also joining my colleague. I'm not going to prolong my opening remarks and listing all the other possible discussion topics later on. I would like to also just mention that this meeting here, where we are part of now, the technical expert meetings have been playing an increasingly important role in defining the new opportunities and enhance the climate action and the collaboration between the different actors. Its aim is to identify high potential mitigation policies, practices, and technologies, and facilitate implementation through partnerships. I urge you to take part in these TEMs and discussions and the collaboration forum to make connection and build these transformative partnerships. I wish you all the best to your discussions.
Right, thank you very much indeed. In a couple of seconds, I'm going to introduce two keynote speakers, and after that, we're going to open the floor to you. And we really want to hear from as many people as we can in the room, from parties, convention bodies, international organizations, and non-party stakeholders, as we like to call them. And I think it's important, I'm sure you've got all the documentation, but it's important to note this is the opening plenary, but there are many sessions this week on 7 thematic sessions. And of course, there's going to be a final plenary at the end when we try and bring it all together. And we're hoping that that will point us in the direction of where we can go towards accelerated action in the urban and land use area. I think we're trying to do something a little special this week at the Secretariat. I hope you can bear with us, and I hope that you actually enjoy these sessions. So let me now turn to Martin Frick. Martin is Director of the Climate and Environment Division of the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization. And Martin, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Nick, and a very good afternoon to all of you. After your introduction that this is a cross-cutting issue, I hope we can end up agreeing that this is also a cross-restoration and a cross-replanting issue. What brings us all together here is the concern about what climate change is doing to our natural habitat and how it's particularly impacting on people. This is nowhere more true than in agriculture. Agriculture has always been the interface between human activity and natural resources, and nowhere is it that we feel the impact of climate change already today so severely. And let us remind ourselves that we are about roughly 1 degree warming above pre-industrial times. And already at this 1 degree, we are feeling already heat waves, storms, droughts, extreme rainfall events all over the planet. Now, the Paris Agreement recognized the gap that is between what is the political declaration that we should stay below 2 or better 1.5 degrees and the realities and the pledges. And so this technical expert meeting is, I believe, a very timely one, as it shows us where is the potential to act immediately to implement on the obligations taken by state parties in Paris, but also to look forward to increasing ambition for a post-Paris agreement. Let me say that agriculture is, of course, the second biggest source of emissions there is. After energy use, land use and agriculture amount to the second rank in global emissions. And with the trend that we are having now, and the co-chair mentioned the increasing number of people on this planet, but let me add to that also the increasing trend for urbanization, particularly in developing countries, particularly on the African continent, is making this time a decisive time to decide how future land use and city planning has to look like, because together with changing food systems, it will drastically change the way we do agriculture and we see agriculture, and it will frame how our emissions globally will look like after 2030. We need to be careful when we speak about land because there is conflicting demands on land. Let me just mention a few. We have, of course, to produce food, and we have to produce more food if we are to obtain SDG 2, zero hunger, by 2030. At the same time, there is demand for more renewable energy. But also, we know about the potential of sequestering carbon in soil, so we should also be producing more biomass while increasing soil organic carbon. But all of this is on the backdrop of the ecosystem that actually keeps us alive on this planet. So land is the place where biodiversity happens, where our ecosystem services stem from, and where our water supply origins from, just to name a few. The agricultural sectors, however, can also and should also be a driver of sustainable development. Particularly in less developed countries, they are providing employment, economic development, and are central to reduce hunger and poverty and to sustainably managing natural resources. Still today, agriculture is the biggest employer on this planet, and more than 1 billion people actually find work and livelihood in agriculture. Therefore, clearly, we need to optimize the use of land and water to maximize benefits and synergies and to reduce trade-offs. Let me say that representing FAO, of course, I would highlight food security and nutrition for what it is, but looking through the lens of food security and nutrition and the different dimensions of it, from the availability of food, access of food, physically and economically, utilization, nutrition, cooking, water quality, and the stability of these. This is also a very good lens to look at how the climate agenda and the development agenda actually can come together in concrete action. The agricultural sectors are very different from other sectors of human activity, of course. They involve natural processes, but they also involve culture and are deeply ingrained in what humans are doing and have been doing on this planet for a very long time. Let me point out again a very simple fact. In agriculture, you're dealing with more stakeholders than in any other place for climate action. So how do you reach out to more than 1 billion people working in agriculture and a staggering 1/3 of the world population directly depending on farming households? Clearly, the agricultural sectors can bring transformational change in the climate change world, but at the same time, we have to bring transformational change to the agricultural sectors to leverage the potential. Many of the actions we are taking today will not cause an effect overnight. Many things in agriculture take time. Planting a tree takes time. Restoring soils takes time. And this is why it's so important to take action now, pre-2020, and look into the potential, which in fact is enormous. We are supporting integrated landscape and value chain approaches because you have to look at food production as a system, which is a long chain from the producer to the local distributor, supermarket, where you are buying your food. When you're looking at both, you need to take into consideration the social, economic, and environmental constraints, but also the opportunities within the landscape and in the value chain. In all of this, agriculture is part of the climate solution, and it must be part of the solution. The sector is quite simply too big to be ignored. In this, we need to understand that the food and agriculture sectors are fundamental for human development, and they play a significant response in our global response. It is indeed possible to increase both agricultural productivity and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Let us just all be reminded that 1/3 of our agricultural production is wasted every single time. And as we have said, if food waste would be a country, it would be the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter on this planet. Of course, agriculture is often also very energy intensive, which means that the enormous amount of energy put into agriculture is also to 1/3 wasted. This is also a huge opportunity because it can actually relatively easily be addressed, and over the next days we will have ample opportunity to look into different sectors on how to harness the potential of agriculture. Nick, how am I doing with time?
I don't know. I was enjoying it. I wasn't really concentrating.
Good. Give me 2 more minutes to wrap up.
2 more minutes then, yeah.
So 2 things that we have been doing is developing an approach how to look at agriculture, what the lens could be, which we call climate smart agriculture. That's a conceptual framework, how you actually can look into the synergies and trade-offs between 3 different points. How to increase productivity and incomes, because all of that is not worthwhile if you don't supply for the livelihoods of people. How you build resilience and can adapt to climate change, and at the same time, how can you promote practices that are reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And we've seen an enormous uptake in recommendations by almost 90% of the member states who have explicitly mentioned the land sectors as a potential source of their mitigation efforts in the national designated contributions for the Paris Agreements. So we are all quite excited to be here and to contribute to your work with our expertise. We stand ready to work with you, and of course we need all of the people and all of the stakeholders represented here at SBSTA, because as I said at the outset, reaching out to 1 billion people is a very, very big job. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you very much indeed, Martin. And we're also very delighted to have with us Manuel de Araujo, who is mayor of Quolimane in Mozambique in Africa. And so he's on the front line managing a city. Tell us about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Dear UNFCCC Secretariat and high-level climate change champions, It's indeed an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure for me to join you at this opening of the latest series of technical expert meetings on mitigation with a special focus on urban environment and land issues. Thank you very much also for the kind invitation and the support of ICLEI, the local government for sustainability, to facilitate my engagement in this event. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure how many of you can easily show my city or even my country on the map. And I'm not sure also if any of you have ever visited that part of the world. Probably, or maybe, you may have heard of a woman who gave birth to a child on a tree during the 2000 floods in my country. That's it. I think you may have guessed it. I'm from Mozambique, one of the poorest countries in the world and one of the most vulnerable countries in the world. And I am the mayor, as the moderator said, of a 250,000 inhabitants. But let me tell you, this is not the first time I'm following you. And of course, it's a privilege to have this opportunity this time again. I have tested the bitter test at the COP. I repeat, I have tested the bitter test of failure. That's what I wanted to say at the COP in Copenhagen. But also, I had the privilege and the honor of experiencing the good test of victory in Paris, as I think most of you may have experienced too. As we all know, the world is today testing uncharted waters for a change. France yesterday gave us reason for a renewable hope with the result of the elections, after the disappointing statements coming from the other side of the Atlantic. We all recall the important role that the US administration played towards the Paris Accord. In fact, this is a reality and the biggest question that we have to solve together. How can we make UN negotiations reflect the reality of our daily lives? And how can you help us solve our challenges, the day-to-day challenges that we face in our cities? And that is why me and many of my fellow mayors, councillors, governors, and their staff are here for, to build the bridge between reality on the ground and negotiations. Yes, I repeat, the bridge between reality and negotiations. Because when an extreme event happens, we are there on the forefront. We are the first to face the consequences, and citizens are there also expecting quick answers, not just empty promises. And the reason is also clear. The challenges and opportunities ahead of us are beyond the individual capacity of any of us, but we can all face and meet them only if we can act together. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share with you how far we are in the implementation of the Climate Change Convention in Mozambique, particularly in Quolimane municipality. After the government of my country, the country of Mozambique, approved in 2012 the National Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation Strategy and an integrated waste management strategy, we at Quolimane municipality approved our own local municipal adaptation plan, and we are now in process of formulating the waste management landfill project. We are also working with UN Habitat in teaching people on how to build resilience housing. We are promoting means of transport which are not only sustainable, but which are also pro-poor. Thus, our city, the city of Quolimane, is considered today as the capital of biking in Mozambique. I know this takes time, but we also should not waste our time by reinventing the wheel. I'm very happy to see that these technical negotiations are now led by the champions, you, and you are very much effectively connected to constituencies and developed through a multi-year, multi-level program. This is certainly a good legacy of the Paris Agreement. I sincerely recommend you to make benefit of your previous dialogues. My colleagues in Italy have informed me about the treasure of proposals, analysis, examples developed over the years of which should guide your work. You can also benefit from many of the other processes through the opportunities on SDGs and also through the new urban agenda. And your discussions today should help us to look for the future in a more trust and hope. For sure, we need technology, finance, and tools for new and enhanced action. But more importantly, we need dialogue and collaborative work here in the UNFCCC, but also back in our countries and at the local level. And let me give you my final proposal. On the way towards Paris, I worked with Italy through its transformative action plan to present my sustainable solid waste management project as a contribution to increase global ambition. It's a tiny proposal. It's an initiative. Since Paris, you are continuing to discuss. We are generating our waste and waiting for you to see and support our plans, like waiting for Godot. Let us make a difference that when we come here next time in Bonn in November, we can show the world that you have heard us, that you have listened to us by reaching to solutions and by showing that there is still hope in the process. I will leave you today, but I heard that you will meet on Thursday at the Collaborative Forum, and I hope my colleagues from Italy can share with me some good responses for this meeting, for my transformative actions, for my city, and for the people I left there. And I hope I can tell my people that coming here was worthwhile, and this unstoppable, irreversible transformation has already started, and no city, no region, and no citizen in the world will be left out of this new journey, because this will be a true transformation only and only if all of us can reach them. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor. So now it's your turn as the audience, as the delegates, drawn from different backgrounds and different places, to, in a sense, contribute to this debate and to give us some of your insights on what's going on in the urban environment, what's going on in land use, some shining examples of change, positive change, as we said, even examples of where things have gone, wrong or badly wrong, because we can learn from that too. So if somebody would like to open up here and give us a perspective, we're all ears. Anybody want to put their little lights on or wave a flag or? Ah, yes. Gentleman over here on the right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change is pleased to address this expert meeting. we address those cross-cutting issues of particular concern to us. For one, climate change is a human rights and indigenous rights issue. Climate change adversely affects millions of people's rights to life, the right to integrity of the person, to food, to water, to habitat, almost the full panoply of rights guaranteed by the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, as well as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We are concerned that our lands and territories, particularly forests, are seen as low-hanging fruit for the generation of carbon credits and offsets, both market and non-market. We oppose the use of carbon offsets as a human rights and indigenous rights issue. They do not work. It is not only that offsets allow polluters to continue to pollute the atmosphere, offsets do not reduce either emissions or global warming. On forests and mitigation, we again repeat that the integration of indigenous peoples in national forest planning is absolutely necessary to ensure the sustainability not only of forests, but of the continued viability of indigenous peoples as peoples. States must ensure the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples in forest planning, respecting our right to free, prior, and informed consent, and recognizing our sustainable customary forest management and land use practices. Ensuring the security and ownership of our lands and territories is critical not only in mitigating climate change, but also to the assurance of forest sustainable development. On agriculture, many studies, including the FAO high-level expert panels, have come to the conclusion that industrialized agriculture actually is not sustainable and that it increases greenhouse gas emissions. These same studies indicate that small-scale farming is sustainable and should be supported. 70% of the people of the world are fed by small producers. It has been shown that our traditional livelihoods and production of our means of subsistence contributes to food security, biodiversity enhancement, carbon sequestration, and the well-being of millions of people. Our food production is an integral part of our cultures, and the production of our means of subsistence should be recognized as cultural heritage. We are therefore willing to establish partnerships with states in addressing poverty and climate change and in achieving sustainable development goals, as well as our own sustainability as indigenous peoples, as long as our rights are observed and respected. On private sector involvement, we are concerned that the private sector involvement in climate action has not been kind to indigenous peoples. Private sector involvement has led to our displacement from our lands and territories, the loss of our livelihoods and traditional means of subsistence. It has been an unwelcome vision of development imposed upon us and our communities that has not respected our right to free, prior, and informed consent and our self-determination and our own vision of development. The private sector should adhere to the respect and protection of indigenous peoples' collective rights and free, prior, and informed consent in all their climate change activity. The way this relates to cities, if you please, Mr. Chairman, is that as indigenous peoples are driven off the land by these ill-conceived notions of development and climate change activity, they end up in the cities. They end up in the same urban slums along with millions of others. And those collections of people continue to grow because the vision of development that the private sector has, that many of the states have, really is inimical to reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and to a sustainable agriculture and a sustainable future. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your perspectives there. Let me say that while we're delighted to hear statements like that, I think we also want to hear, in a sense, some very direct, practical examples of where partnerships are happening with the private sector, without the private sector, between governments, with governments, in the area of land use, in the area of the urban setting. I see there are something like 7,000 cities around the world now, you know, with targets on climate change. They have to do something to meet those targets. So can we hear some examples of that? Have we got some examples from countries with forested areas? What are they doing? Degraded land projects, how's that changing? Somebody's pointing out that somebody else wants to say something. Where? Anyway, whoever it is, far at the back. I need glasses. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Simona Lovea from the Global Forest Coalition, based in Paraguay. First of all, I would very much like to support the previous speaker in his observation. And to mention some very concrete links also between, some of the issues he talked about and urban environments is, of course, the consumption patterns of urban consumers that might impact on precisely the sustainable land use models in the countryside. And one concrete example is meat and dairy consumption. I think it's now generally acknowledged that high levels of meat and dairy consumption trigger a large amount of deforestation, land grabbing, and other social and environmental problems in the countryside. And I think there's actually very interesting examples of how both urban consumers have started up networks working with sometimes urban producers of food. My local organization, Strawberry Ventures, involved in a project in Asunción in which they try to promote urban agroecology so that people produce their own food. But of course, also a lot of awareness raising projects so that people reduce their meat and dairy consumption in the light of, for example, the impact that soy has in countries like Paraguay. But also, for example, a government like Germany is increasingly aware of the ecological footprints of, for example, soy imports. And I think the kind of steps that that kind of government can take are really important to address that issue. Also in light of the impacts that soy and beef production have on indigenous people's rights and lands. So in that respect, I think there's a lot of very good examples how this issue can be addressed. And I hope they will also inspire other governments and consumer groups and other rights holders and stakeholders to take them over. Thank you.
Do we have any other interventions? Yes, we do. Right there, thank you.
I would also, I'm Sridhar from Environics Trust based in India. I wholly endorse the first speaker's views, and I think it's time that we start thinking of de-urbanizing and how we could go about doing it, and how governments can very seriously look at decentralized operations instead of bringing together lots of its own facilities in one place. Also, a lot of smaller towns that need more infrastructure and better support. And particularly, we are finding that smaller towns, especially in South Asia, they are more climate friendly than larger urban cities agglomerations that we tend to build over time. Therefore, I think it's time that how smaller towns and can be supported globally, it should be an issue that over the next few days, I think we need to consider.
Okay, is there a perfect size city for sustainability, and what does it look like? It's an idea. Okay, so yeah. Yes, Nepal there, thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Good afternoon, colleagues. I think you have raised very important issue here, how we can increase resiliency, increase agricultural productivity, income, as well reduce the greenhouse gas emission, particularly from the cities. Nepal has a very bitter experience from the 2015 disastrous earthquake. Over 8,000 people lost their lives, mostly in the inaccessible mountain areas, also in the capital city of Kathmandu. Learning from there on, we have started a couple of measures to reduce the vulnerability as well as start making our cities clean. What is most important for those cities which are gradually developing from towns, municipalities to the urban areas, we lack standards in the past. We had very congested roads, dirty rivers, lack of energy, sewage system very poor, as well the growing temperature, increasing migration, everything has made a mess. To this end, what we have realized and begin worth mentioning here is perhaps one of the very large campaign. Every week in Kathmandu, we have 2 hours of voluntary campaign for cleaning up our capital rivers. We have done this for the last 210 weeks continuously. Voluntary participation of civil society, government officials, and local inhabitants. That has changed the face of our rivers. That is probably one of the lessons that we can share. Water must be flow clean. Second important thing that we have realized that open space are most important. During the time of disasters, we fail to rescue on time because of lack of wide roads and open space. The third important thing that we have to combine resiliency, climate change mitigation with biodiversity. Cities must be green. And that greenery should not be monotonous and monoculture. That could be diverse. The fourth important thing we have started is solid waste management that must have support for these vulnerable countries in this respect. And when we have disasters of various kinds, reconstruction takes place in a usual fashion that is not going to make our cities safer. So build back better. That is the principle that we are trying to adopt. However, we lack resources, initiatives, supports, technology, etc., etc. If that is planned on time for new emerging cities, probably the risk of similar disasters could be reduced in the future. Thank you.
So basically, you mobilize the public in support of a better, healthier city. But our dear friend here from Mozambique said that he'd been trying to get some solid waste management support for his city. You seem to be doing solid waste. Was that a public-private partnership, or how did you actually finance that?
That is a combination. That is a combination. Thank you.
Okay, any other speakers? Yes, there's a lady over there, got her hand up.
Thank you for the word. My name is Angelita Kappers from the Young Energy Expert Group in the Netherlands. We might have a clear-cut example from Amsterdam, where we set up investment fund for small investments in green energy technology. And for instance, we invest in small-scale startups like broaden the infrastructure for bicycles. So we use the space in a different way, less cars, more bicycles, or in gardens, city gardens. So it is a public-private partnership in which where the government or the municipality is involved as private partners. And it works really well. The maximum investment is approximately 5 million euros. And we did pilot and we rolled it out and it goes pretty well. Thank you for your word.
Well, Amsterdam is awesome in terms of the number of journeys made by bicycle, which is just phenomenal. I used to live and work in London. We had cycle lanes that went for about half an inch and then they'd stop, you know, and you were suddenly thrown back into the traffic. Bond's also quite cool for cycling as well. Okay, anybody else out there? Yes, the gentleman right at the back there.
Good afternoon. My name is David Lapp, and I'm with Engineers Canada. So I wanted to present a perspective from Canada on this subject. In Canada, we have a group called the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which is a body that is an association of about 3,000 communities in Canada. And they've actually formed a partnership with ICLEI in Canada. And they run a program called Partners in Climate Protection. And I just wanted to read you a few details about this. It's a network of Canadian municipal governments that are committed to reducing greenhouse gases and acting on climate change. And it's basically been running for about over 20 years, and over 300 municipalities out of that membership have joined this project. And it's basically what it is it's a program, a funding program that supports communities to take action against climate change through a 5-milestone process that guides members in creating inventories of greenhouse gases. Then they set realistic and achievable greenhouse gas reduction targets, develop local action plans and implement them using specific measurable actions to reduce the emissions. So if you want to get more information, it's www.fcm.ca, Partners in Climate Protection. I think it's a really good model to consider in other places where you can organize municipalities, because part of the issue here is institutionalizing this, as well as, of course, individual actions.
And do you partner at all with any municipalities in the developing world? Could this be an exportable idea or something that you could collaborate on? And
Well, I think so, because, of course, ICLEI is a worldwide organization, and so we're working with the ICLEI Canada. So certainly, I think it would be worth exploring, I think, that kind of a model in other countries for sure.
there was somebody at the back there. Was there a lady at the back there that wanted to say something? There's 2 ladies now at the back. That's fantastic. So why don't we go for you there and then the one over there afterwards?
Dear distinguished guests, good afternoon. I'm a representative from China, but today I want to present a problem from Syria because I recently watched a documentary in BBC. It says due to the deforestation and the global warming, lead to a lot of problems like drought. Like in Syria, there are many drought problems lead to the farmers lost their land. Their land is no longer productive. They suffer a lot in their agriculture, and also then they lost their jobs, which lead to the very poverty. They lose their land, and even lead to the civil wars. I want to ask a question, and how we can help to deal with the relationship with the climate change, poverty, and even deal with peace.
So you're saying that, what is actually the point? Sorry, I just didn't quite get it.
See, how can we deal with the relationship with the climate change and the poverty?
Okay, well, I'll leave that up to others to comment on that. Then the lady there at the back.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Lenhart, and I'm with WWF in the One Planet Cities team. WWF is committed to increasing political leadership, public engagement, and entrepreneurship to transform cities. Our aim is to support the creation and development of One Planet cities around the globe, cities that enable all people to thrive and prosper while respecting the ecological limits of our one and only planet. We have done this chiefly through the One Planet City Challenge, which until now has engaged 328 cities with participation from 30 countries. It was inspired by Earth Hour, so formerly called the Earth Hour City Challenge. And chiefly, we work with reporting within ICLEI's Carbon Climate Registry, and then use the cities that report there to find leading cities and inspire action to celebrate what those cities are doing and to encourage other action on the ground. Thank you.
Yep, no, it's certainly true. There's a lot of initiatives right now in this area, and it's great to hear from WWF. I mean, many initiatives in the area of the urban improvements, and we said, 7,000 cities now, I think, made commitments up to Paris, through Paris, and since Paris. Anybody got anything really burning that they think is so unique that none of us have ever heard of it before, and we'd all go running to embrace it on either the urban agenda or the land use agenda? Or is it plugging away at the same things that we've always plugged at? We just have to get better at it. I'm looking around the room. Martin, you've heard a few things. Maybe you could come in and give us some pearls of wisdom just at this interim juncture.
Well, thank you very much. We had excellent interventions, which we just heard, and I can only pick out a couple of points, but let me start with the first intervention by the representative of the indigenous peoples. And full disclaimer, you mentioned the UN Declaration on the Right of Indigenous Peoples. I've been a negotiator both in Geneva and New York on this declaration, which is very dear to me. If we look at sustainable land use, we have a lesson to learn from indigenous peoples, because obviously they know how to sustainably manage the land, because otherwise they wouldn't be there anymore. So I would strongly endorse your point, and also say when it comes to cultural identity, this really is closely related to the agricultural systems we do have in place. And that in return also feeds back to the health and nutrition agenda, because the food that you are producing locally is obviously also very good food. Let me highlight in this context a piece of work that FAO is leading, which might be particularly interesting for indigenous peoples. It's the voluntary guideline on tenure, because tenure questions are very, very often at the heart of sustainable land use, and ensuring that smallholders hold the land rights for the land they're actually working on is one of the keys, in my view, to sustainable development. And there are fantastic examples on how you can create and correlate traditional tenure systems, which are very often oral tradition, with more modern, and I'm saying that in inverted commas because there is no qualification meant, but more computer-based, GPS-based tenure systems, which can quite often actually guarantee that the people who have been working the land can continue to do so. Brings me to another point where you said, and looping it, land use and cities, and you say, well, if you don't get the land use side right, then where will the people end up? They will end up in urban slums. But if you look at cities, and that came up in a couple of interventions as well, what is a livable city? Well, a livable city is also a city in which nature has a space and nature has room. So we see, and it's interesting to see how urban elites, you know, the sort of best fed, rich, most educated young people, where the trends are. And the trends go to urban farming and urban gardening, and working on local food systems. Not so long ago, I've been to Detroit, and Detroit is a city that has seen a technological meltdown, basically almost becoming an urban desert. And where you see where social life is coming up again, this is exactly around initiatives of urban farming and urban gardening. So it's also an element to revitalize cities and to make cities more livable. In a very concrete sense of the term, if you look at urban trees, for example, just a simple tree cover in some areas in a city can decrease the temperature in summer in inner cities by 4 to 6 degrees. And whoever lived in a hot summer in a big city knows how unbearable hot it can get. I think, if I understood correctly, the point from the lady from China was also around land degradation and land restoration. And in my view, if there is one point where you can really tangibly bring together the climate agenda and the development agenda, then it's stopping land degradation and turning it around into land restoration, where you very, very often have simple methodologies which are extremely labor intensive, but you have that particularly in countries where unemployment is a huge topic. So if you combine agricultural technology, well, it sounds like a mouthful, but it's very simple things to do, with a bit of social protection and investment. If you're able to funnel climate money into land restoration, you will reap many benefits from the mitigation that we are discussing in this TEM, but of course everything else across, biodiversity, water retention capacity, fertility, of course, agricultural production at some places of successful land restoration is 50-fold of what you had before. And it goes all the way to fighting rural poverty and to gender empowerment. Because if you look at migration, migration is often male, while women and children stay in the places where they come from, just becoming more poor. So I think land is also not just with this specific mitigation perspective a contributor to the solution, but also a very good way to look at things in an often frustratingly complex and interdependent international agenda with 17 SDGs and the climate agenda. And sometimes we're asking ourselves how we can bring all of this together. And I think if you look at a piece of land, if you look in a landscape context, then what needs to be done becomes actually quite evident. And I think the good news that we are bringing here is that mitigation in the land sectors must not go to the expenses of smallholder farmers and poor populations. Quite on the contrary, if you get this right, you get many other issues right as well. Thank you.
No, I think when you think about the cities and you think about agriculture, I remember a fascinating report that the UNEP, the UN Environment, did just a few years ago, I think with other partners, on the link between agriculture and cities in terms of wastewater discharges. I mean, the amount of fertilizer, either from human waste or from agricultural waste, that goes straight out of the rivers into the oceans, causes problems in the coastal waters, which, if it was recycled, that fertilizer, would have a potential for farmers and also would reduce the need for fertilizer production, therefore perhaps greenhouse gas emissions. I don't know how many cities actually really do recycle the fertilizer potential of their wastewaters. But does anybody else want to speak to us? Any other hands up? Just wave, you know, we can see you from here. Yeah. Med, is there something you'd like to comment on?
Yes, I just want to reinforce, I think, from what I had across the spectrum from South America, China, Asia, Nepal, India, Canada, is just a position that reinforces what most of us think, that there is a need for us to work together and come up with a model which is both inclusive and collaborative, that from national governments at international level, and most important, including the local level. The first speaker there brought the issue of indigenous knowledge. The other mentioned the issue of urban agriculture, be it waste management. I think that all the issues raised here fall into this need, that, you know, there are several issues. For each group, there are different priorities, but it's important for us all to have in mind that we need to be aware that we are in this world and we have got goals, and the idea is exactly to bring up those issues, but we need to have a common strategy, an inclusive and collaborative strategy. Thank you.
Right, so I think we're going to kind of wrap up here now. Just to point out that it is a busy week coming up. These topics can be dived into much deeper than this kind of opening plenary where we just want to kind of set the scene. I just want to say that tomorrow in the morning at 11:30, it's about city-level collaboration to achieve emission reductions and sustainable development. There's a great lineup of cities showcasing what they're doing. Singapore, Bogota, Bonn, somewhere in Belgium, and somewhere in Benin, which would be cool to be at. In the afternoon on Tuesday, you've got basically one on supporting accelerated actions in terms of the urban environment and land use. You've got Irina speaking, you've got GIZ, CCAP, I don't know who they are, but I'm sure they'll let us know, somebody from the World Bank, and FAO again. And then Tuesday, also an event there in the afternoon too on innovative policy and technology solutions for sustainable urban development. I won't read out the list of speakers, you can find them in your documents. Wednesday, forestry and other land use. Representatives from governments showing what they're doing, Russia, for example, Indonesia, Australia, and the EU. And then on Thursday, private sector engagement, We've got people from Syngenta, Yara, the iForm Organics International, and others. And then what do we got Friday? Oh yeah, closing plenary. So a busy week. Come with a sense of energy and inspiration. I know that you're all keeping back all your best ideas for these other meetings during the week. And enjoy yourselves. Let's come up with some innovative ideas that we can then discuss in the final plenary and hopefully move the needle forward to greater climate action at COP23 in Bonn. So thank you very much and goodbye.